The morning sun filtered through the half-closed blinds of room 203 at Westridge High School. Maya Chen slipped into her seat in the back row, carefully placing her worn blue notebook on the desk. She tucked a strand of black hair behind her ear and glanced around. No one seemed to notice her arrival, which was exactly how she liked it. The clock on the wall ticked to 8:30, and Dr. Roberts walked in, his arms loaded with papers and an old leather briefcase that had seen better days. The classroom quieted down as he dropped everything onto his desk with a thud. "Good morning, everyone," he said, pushing up his glasses. His voice carried the kind of authority that came from 30 years of teaching physics. "Let's pick up where we left off yesterday." Maya opened her notebook and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. Her handwriting was neat and small, making the most of every inch of paper. She couldn't afford to waste anything, not paper, not time, and definitely not opportunities. She had moved to this town just 6 months ago after her mom got a job at the local hospital. Being the new kid was never easy, but Maya found it particularly hard at Westridge High. The school prided itself on academic excellence, and most students had known each other since elementary school. Tight-knit groups had already formed long ago, leaving little room for newcomers. Dr. Roberts turned to the whiteboard and began writing equations. His advanced physics class was notorious for being the toughest course in school. Only 15 students had signed up this year, and Maya was the only sophomore. The rest were juniors and seniors preparing for college applications to prestigious science programs. "Today we're diving deeper into quantum mechanics," Dr. Roberts announced, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm that most of the class didn't share. Tyler, the star quarterback who surprisingly excelled at physics, raised his hand. "Dr. Roberts, will this be on the midterm?" A few students chuckled. Dr. Roberts sighed. "Yes, Tyler. But more importantly, what we're discussing today challenges our very understanding of how the universe works." Maya felt a flutter of excitement. This was why she had fought so hard to get into this class despite the counselor's warnings about it being too advanced for a sophomore. She didn't care about grades or college applications, at least not yet. She cared about understanding how things worked. At home, she had converted half of her small bedroom into a makeshift lab. She had salvaged old electronics from garage sales and dumpsters, taking them apart to understand their inner workings. Her mom worried about the clutter, but supported her daughter's curiosity. "Just don't blow up the apartment," she'd joke, knowing Maya was careful and methodical with her experiments. As Dr. Roberts explained wave-particle duality, Maya listened intently, her pen moving across the page without her needing to look down. She had read about these concepts in library books last summer, but hearing them explained by someone who understood them deeply was different. "The fascinating thing about quantum mechanics," Dr. Roberts continued, "is that it defies our everyday intuition. The rules that govern the very small are nothing like the rules we experience in our daily lives." Lily, one of the seniors who always sat in the front row, raised her hand. "So like the cat is both dead and alive until we look?" Schrodinger's cat, yes, that's a famous thought experiment that illustrates quantum superposition. Dr. Roberts nodded approvingly. "Though I should clarify that no actual cats were harmed in the development of quantum theory." The class laughed, and Maya smiled too, though she kept her eyes on her notes. She had learned it was easier to stay invisible. At her old school, her enthusiasm for science had made her a target for teasing. "Science freak," they'd called her. Here she was determined to keep a low profile. During lunch, Maya sat alone at the end of a long table, a physics book propped against her water bottle as she ate her sandwich. She wasn't actually reading, the cafeteria was too noisy for that, but the book served as a shield, a way to look occupied rather than lonely. "Is this seat taken?" Maya looked up to see Li Wei, another student from her physics class, standing there with a lunch tray. "Oh no, it's free," she said, surprised that anyone would choose to sit with her. Li Wei sat down and immediately launched into a complaint about the morning's physics homework. "I stayed up until midnight trying to solve problem number 4, and I'm still not sure if I got it right." Maya had solved that problem in 20 minutes. "It's tricky," she offered, not wanting to sound like she was showing off. "Are you good at this stuff?" Li Wei asked, taking a bite of his apple. "You never say anything in class, but you always look like you know what's going on." Maya shrugged. "I like physics. It makes sense to me." "Lucky you," Li Wei groaned. "My parents expect me to follow my brother to MIT, but at this rate, I'll be lucky to pass Dr. Roberts' class." A part of Maya wanted to offer help. But another part, the part that remembered being mocked for raising her hand too often, held her back. "You'll figure it out," she said instead. The afternoon passed slowly. Maya had history after lunch, then English. Both subjects she found less engaging than science. In English, they were reading The Great Gatsby, and the teacher asked them to discuss the symbolism of the green light. Maya had thoughts about it, how the light represented hopes and dreams that seemed within reach but never truly were. But she kept them to herself, jotting them in the margins of her book instead. When the final bell rang, Maya didn't rush out like the others. She gathered her things slowly, organizing her backpack with precision. As she walked down the hall toward the exit, she passed the science lab and paused. Dr. Roberts was still there, hunched over a stack of papers. For a moment, she thought about knocking, asking him about the quantum entanglement problem she'd been puzzling over since last week. But the courage didn't come, so she continued walking. Outside, the autumn air was crisp. Maya zipped up her jacket and began the 20-minute walk home. Their apartment was in the less affluent part of town, where rent was cheaper. Her mom wouldn't be home for hours. Hospital shifts were long, especially for nurses who were still proving themselves at a new workplace. As she walked, Maya thought about the equations Dr. Roberts had written on the board that morning. There was something elegant about them, something that spoke to the hidden order of the universe. But there was also something that didn't quite fit with what she had read in that old quantum physics textbook she'd found at a used bookstore. At home, Maya heated up leftover rice and vegetables for an early dinner, then spread her homework across the kitchen table. She finished her history and English assignments quickly, saving physics for last, her reward for getting through the rest. Dr. Roberts had assigned 10 problems, each more challenging than the last. Maya worked through them methodically, showing all her steps even though she could have skipped some. She knew that in science the process was as important as the answer. Around 7, her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." Maya texted back a heart emoji, then returned to the final physics problem. This one involved quantum entanglement, the phenomenon Einstein had famously called spooky action at a distance. Two particles, once entangled, would remain connected no matter how far apart they were, with the state of one instantly affecting the state of the other. She chewed on the end of her pencil, staring at the problem. Something about Dr. Roberts' explanation in class didn't sit right with her. He had presented it as a paradox, something that still puzzled researchers. But what if they were approaching it from the wrong angle? Maya pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began working on a different approach. She lost track of time, the kitchen growing dark around her until only the small lamp above the table illuminated her work. When she finally looked up, it was past midnight and she had covered 3 pages with calculations. The next morning, Maya felt tired but strangely energized. She had stayed up far too late, but something had clicked in her mind. She carefully placed her extra work in a folder, separate from her regular homework. She wasn't sure if she was right. Probably not, she told herself. Who was she to think she'd seen something that professional physicists had missed? As she walked to school, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maya decided she would keep her ideas to herself. After all, she was just a sophomore in high school, a nobody who sat in the back row and never raised her hand. What could she possibly have to contribute? Little did she know that in less than 24 hours, that very assumption would be turned completely upside down, and her life would never be the same again. The next morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Maya hurried to school, clutching her folder close to her chest to protect it from the first drops that began to fall. By the time she reached Westridge High, her sneakers were damp and her hair was frizzing from the humidity. She slipped into her first class, World History, just as the bell rang. The teacher, Mrs. Patel, was already writing on the board. "The Cold War and its impact on scientific advancement," she announced. "Today we'll discuss how competition between superpowers drove innovation." Maya tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting back to the quantum entanglement problem she'd worked on last night. The more she thought about it, the more she second-guessed herself. What had seemed like a breakthrough at midnight now felt like the overconfident musings of an exhausted brain. When the bell rang, she gathered her things quickly and headed to her next class. The hallways were packed with students shouting over each other, slamming lockers and rushing to beat the late bell. Maya kept her head down, moving against the current like a small fish swimming upstream. English class passed in a blur of discussions about Fitzgerald's use of color symbolism. Maya contributed a single sentence when called on directly, then retreated back into her thoughts. The equations she'd worked out last night kept rearranging themselves in her mind, searching for a more elegant form. At lunch, she sat alone again. Li Wei was absent today, and Maya found herself missing the brief conversation they'd shared yesterday. She pulled out her folder and looked at her work from the night before, making small adjustments with her pencil, erasing and rewriting, refining her approach. "Is that Dr. Roberts' quantum homework?" a voice asked. Maya looked up to see Zoe Park standing beside her table, lunch tray in hand. Zoe was a senior and president of the science club, headed to Stanford next fall on a full scholarship. Everyone knew who she was. Maya couldn't imagine why she was talking to her. "Sort of," Maya answered, resisting the urge to cover her work with her arm. "It's just some extra stuff I was thinking about." Zoe's eyebrows rose slightly. "Extra like what?" Maya hesitated. "Just a different way of looking at the entanglement problem." "Mind if I sit?" Zoe asked, already pulling out a chair. Before Maya could respond, Zoe had settled across from her and was leaning forward, trying to read Maya's notes upside down. "You're the sophomore in our advanced physics class, right? I don't think we've officially met." "I'm Zoe." "Maya," she said quietly, still unsure why one of the most popular seniors was suddenly interested in talking to her. "So what's your approach?" Zoe asked, gesturing toward Maya's notes. "Because I spent 3 hours on that problem last night and I'm still not sure my answer makes sense." Maya fidgeted with her pencil. "It's probably wrong, but I was thinking about it in terms of information transfer rather than particle states." Zoe's eyes lit up with interest. "Go on." For the next 15 minutes, Maya found herself explaining her theory, slowly at first, then with growing animation as Zoe asked insightful questions. By the time the lunch bell rang, they were deep in discussion. "This is fascinating," Zoe said, gathering her things. "You should definitely show this to Dr. Roberts. It's a really fresh perspective." Maya shook her head. "I don't think it's right. And even if it were, I'm sure someone has already thought of this approach." Zoe gave her a curious look. "You know, sometimes the most important scientific breakthroughs come from people who don't know what's impossible yet." She slung her backpack over her shoulder. "Anyway, think about it. And you should come to science club sometime. We meet Thursdays after school." Maya watched her leave, a strange warm feeling spreading in her chest. It was nice to talk to someone who didn't think she was weird for getting excited about quantum physics. The rest of the afternoon dragged on, with Maya glancing at the clock every few minutes. Finally, it was time for advanced physics. She slid into her usual seat at the back of the room, heart beating a little faster than normal. Her folder with the quantum entanglement work was on her desk, but she hadn't decided if she would turn it in along with her regular homework. Dr. Roberts entered, his wild gray hair looking even more disheveled than usual. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, placing his battered briefcase on the desk. "Before we collect last night's homework, I want to discuss a concept that's been at the forefront of quantum research for the past few decades." He turned to the whiteboard and wrote in large letters, "Quantum entanglement paradox." Maya's breath caught. It was the exact problem she'd been working on all night. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, Dr. Roberts continued, writing the quote on the board. And in many ways, it remains one of the most puzzling aspects of quantum mechanics. When two particles become entangled, they behave as a single system no matter how far apart they are. He drew a diagram showing two particles moving away from each other. If we measure the spin of one particle as up, we know instantly that the other particle's spin must be down. This happens faster than the speed of light, seemingly instantaneously, which appears to violate Einstein's theory of relativity. The classroom was unusually quiet. Even Tyler, who normally found a way to make a joke about everything, was listening intently. "What makes this particularly fascinating," Dr. Roberts said, his voice taking on the tone of wonder that made him such a good teacher, "is that we still don't fully understand how this information is transmitted. It's as if the particles are communicating across space and time in ways our current models can't explain." He turned to face the class. Some of the best minds in physics have been working on this problem for decades. There are several competing theories, but no consensus yet on how to fully integrate quantum entanglement with our other physical laws. Maya's palms were sweating. She looked down at her folder, where her neat handwriting covered pages of calculations approaching the problem from a completely different angle. "So," Dr. Roberts said, clapping his hands together, "any thoughts before we collect yesterday's homework? This is cutting-edge stuff we're talking about, but I'm curious if any of you have insights or questions." The room was silent. A few students exchanged glances, but no one raised their hand. Dr. Roberts waited patiently, then sighed. "All right then, let's move on to, what if it's not actually a paradox?" The words were out of Maya's mouth before she could stop them. Every head in the room turned toward her. Dr. Roberts looked surprised, both that someone had spoken and that it was Maya, who had never voluntarily contributed to class discussions before. "Could you elaborate, Maya?" he asked, his expression curious rather than dismissive. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She hadn't meant to speak up, but now all eyes were on her and there was no going back. "Well," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we're thinking about it wrong? What if the information isn't actually traveling between the particles at all?" Dr. Roberts leaned against his desk, giving her his full attention. "Go on." Maya took a deep breath. "What if, instead of thinking about the particles as separate entities that somehow communicate faster than light, we think of them as two manifestations of the same underlying reality?" The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. "I was working on this last night," Maya continued, gaining confidence as she spoke about the ideas that had kept her up until the early hours. "And I started thinking, what if entanglement isn't about information traveling from one particle to another, but about both particles being connected at a deeper level of reality?" She opened her folder and pulled out her notes, looking down at the equation she'd derived. It was elegantly simple, just a single line that suggested a completely different framework for understanding quantum entanglement. "May I?" Dr. Roberts asked, gesturing toward her notes. Maya nodded and handed him the folder. The class watched in silence as he read through her work, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page he turned. When he finished, he looked up at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. "This is," he started, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "This is a very interesting approach, Maya. You're suggesting that what we perceive as separate particles are actually manifestations of a single underlying field, and that the apparent communication between entangled particles isn't communication at all, but rather the immediate expression of this unified reality." Maya nodded, surprised that he had grasped her idea so quickly. "The equation on the last page shows how this model could work mathematically, without violating relativity." Dr. Roberts turned to the last page again, studying the equation Maya had derived. It was remarkably simple, just a few symbols that rearranged existing quantum formulas in a novel way. "This is," he began again, then looked up at the class, then back at Maya. "This is actually quite brilliant." A murmur went through the classroom. Maya felt her cheeks burning. She wished she could disappear into her chair. "Have you read Bohm's work on the implicate order?" Dr. Roberts asked her. Maya shook her head. "No, sir. I haven't heard of that." Dr. Roberts smiled, a wide, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "That's even more remarkable then, because what you've independently proposed here has some striking similarities to theories that have been gaining traction in the quantum physics community, but with a mathematical framework that's, well, frankly more elegant than anything I've seen published." The class was now openly whispering among themselves. Maya caught fragments. "Who is she again?" "The quiet sophomore. How did she—" "Maya," Dr. Roberts said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Would you be willing to come to the board and explain your approach to the class?" Maya froze. Speaking up from her safe spot in the back row had been terrifying enough. Standing in front of everyone? That was a whole different level of exposure. But Dr. Roberts was looking at her with such earnest interest, and for the first time, so was everyone else in the class. Not with mockery or indifference, but with genuine curiosity. Slowly, she stood up and made her way to the front of the room, feeling as if her legs belonged to someone else. Dr. Roberts handed her a marker, and she turned to face the whiteboard. For a moment, she stared at the blank space, marker poised. Then she began to write. First, the standard equations for quantum entanglement that Dr. Roberts had taught them. Then, step by step, the way she had rethought the problem, culminating in the simple, elegant equation that expressed her new framework. As she wrote, she began to explain her thinking process. Her voice, shaky at first, grew steadier as she focused on the physics rather than the audience. This was familiar territory, even if sharing it wasn't. So instead of trying to explain how information travels faster than light between entangled particles, she concluded, underlining her final equation, this model suggests that no information is traveling at all. The particles aren't separate things communicating with each other. They're different expressions of the same underlying reality. She turned to face the class, capping the marker. The room was completely silent. Then, to her astonishment, Tyler let out a low whistle. "Did you just solve a problem that Einstein couldn't figure out?" he asked, half joking but also clearly impressed. Dr. Roberts stepped forward. "I wouldn't go that far yet," he said, but his eyes were shining with excitement. "But what Maya has proposed is a genuinely novel approach that deserves serious consideration." He turned to Maya. "Would you mind if I shared your work with some colleagues? I know several researchers who would be very interested in this perspective." Maya blinked, unable to process what was happening. This morning, she had been nobody, just the quiet new girl who sat in the back and never spoke up. And now Dr. Roberts, a physicist with decades of experience, wanted to share her work with research scientists? Yes. No, I wouldn't mind," she stammered. "Excellent," Dr. Roberts beamed. "Now let's all thank Maya for this fascinating contribution to our class discussion." To Maya's shock, the entire class burst into applause. Zoe, sitting in the front row, gave her a thumbs up and a wide smile that seemed to say, "I told you so." As Maya returned to her seat, legs shaky and face flushed, she felt something shifting inside her. For the first time since moving to this town, she felt visible, not in the uncomfortable way she'd feared, but in a way that made her feel valued. Dr. Roberts spent the rest of the class exploring the implications of Maya's approach, treating her idea with the seriousness usually reserved for established scientific theories. Every few minutes he would glance back at her, still seeming amazed that this quiet sophomore had come up with such an insight. When the final bell rang, Maya gathered her things slowly, still trying to process what had happened. As students filed out, several paused by her desk. "That was really cool," said Tyler, the quarterback who had never spoken to her before. "Seriously impressive," added another girl whose name Maya didn't know. Zoe lingered until the room had nearly emptied. "Told you it was worth sharing," she said with a grin. "You're definitely coming to science club tomorrow, right? No excuses now." Maya nodded, unable to hold back a small smile of her own. As she walked toward the door, Dr. Roberts called out to her. "Maya, could I speak with you for a moment?" She approached his desk, wondering if he'd reconsidered and decided her idea wasn't so interesting after all. "I want you to know," he said, looking at her over his glasses, "that in 30 years of teaching, I've never seen a student approach a problem quite like you did today. You have a remarkable mind." "Thank you," Maya whispered, not knowing what else to say. "I've already sent an email to a colleague at MIT," Dr. Roberts continued. "With your permission, I'd like to share your full notes with her. She's been working on quantum entanglement for years." Maya nodded, still struggling to believe this was really happening. "And one more thing," Dr. Roberts added, his expression turning serious. "Don't ever be afraid to speak up in my class again. Science advances when people look at old problems in new ways. That's exactly what you did today." As Maya finally left the classroom and walked down the nearly empty hallway, she felt as if she were floating. One line, one single equation had changed everything. She had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in a long while, she was excited to find out. The rest of the school day passed in a blur for Dr. Roberts. He taught his final class of the day, a basic physics course for freshmen, but his mind kept drifting back to Maya's equation. In 30 years of teaching, he had encountered bright students before, students who went on to prestigious universities and successful careers in science. But he had never seen anything quite like this. As soon as the last bell rang, he hurried back to his classroom, shutting the door behind him. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number on his cell phone. "Vivian. It's Greg Roberts," he said when the call connected. "Yes, it has been a while. Listen, something incredible just happened in my class today, and I need your opinion on it, Dr. Vivian." Wong was an old friend from graduate school who now ran the quantum research lab at MIT. If anyone could verify whether Maya's insight was as groundbreaking as he suspected, it was her. One of my high school students just proposed a completely novel approach to quantum entanglement, he continued, pacing the length of his classroom. I know how that sounds, but trust me, this is unlike anything I've seen from an undergraduate, let alone a sophomore in high school. He paused, listening to his friend's skeptical response. Yes, I'm aware of how many crackpot theories are out there, he said, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. This isn't that. The mathematics checks out as far as I can tell. It's elegant, builds on established quantum theory but reframes the entanglement problem entirely. Another pause. No, she hasn't been published before. She's 15 years old, Vivian. And from what I can gather, entirely self-taught beyond the basics. He stopped pacing and ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. I'm sending you her notes now. Just look at them, please. Page 4 has the key equation. Call me back when you've had a chance to review it. He hung up and immediately began photographing Maya's notes, which he'd kept with her permission. His hands were still shaking slightly with excitement as he emailed the images to Dr. Wong. Meanwhile, Maya walked home in a state of disbelief, barely noticing the puddles from the morning rain. The events of the past hour kept replaying in her mind. Had that really happened? Had she actually stood in front of the whole class and presented her idea? And had Dr. Roberts, a real physicist, actually taken it seriously? When she reached her apartment building, she climbed the 3 flights of stairs slowly, still lost in thought. As she unlocked the door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Zoe from physics. Got your number from Lee Wei. Everyone is talking about what happened in Robert's class. You're kind of a celebrity now. Don't forget science club tomorrow. Maya stared at the message. A celebrity? That was the last thing she wanted. She had spent so long trying to be invisible, trying not to stand out, and now apparently the whole school was talking about her. She flopped onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the afternoon was wearing off, leaving her drained. She should start her homework, but instead she just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Zoe. BTW, I heard Roberts calling someone right after class. Sounded like a big deal. I think he was talking to someone at MIT. MIT, one of the top universities for physics in the world. Maya sat up, her heart pounding again. This was getting out of hand. It was just an idea, a different approach to a problem. Surely it wasn't as significant as Dr. Roberts seemed to think. Across town, in his modest home office, Dr. Roberts was waiting anxiously for Dr. Wong to call back. He had canceled his evening plans, telling his wife that something extraordinary had happened at work. Now he sat at his desk, reviewing Maya's notes again, checking and rechecking her mathematics. The more he examined her work, the more impressed he became. The approach was not only novel, but showed a deep intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that most graduate students would envy. And the way she had derived that final equation, so simple yet so profound, suggested a natural gift for theoretical physics. His phone rang at 8:43 p.m. Dr. Wong. Greg? Her voice sounded different, excited, almost breathless. I've been looking at these notes for the past 2 hours. Who did you say this student was? Her name is Maya Chen, sophomore. Transferred to our school about 6 months ago. And she came up with this entirely on her own? No guidance from you or anyone else? As far as I know, yes. She's never spoken up in class before today. I had no idea she was even interested in quantum theory beyond what we cover in the curriculum. A long pause on the other end of the line. Vivian, he prompted. I need to share this with my team, she said finally. This approach, it's not entirely without precedent in the theoretical literature, but the mathematical framework she's developed is remarkably elegant. It could potentially resolve several ongoing issues in quantum field theory. Dr. Roberts felt a surge of validation. So I wasn't overreacting? No, Greg, you weren't, Dr. Wong replied, her voice serious. This young woman may have made a significant contribution to theoretical physics. Does she have any plans for college yet? She's only a sophomore, Vivian. MIT has early recruitment programs for exceptional students. Very exceptional students. Dr. Roberts smiled. I'll keep that in mind. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to make sure her work holds up to scrutiny first. I'm setting up a Zoom call with my research team for tomorrow evening, Dr. Wong said. Would your student be willing to join and explain her approach directly? Dr. Roberts hesitated. Maya was clearly shy. It had taken enormous courage for her to speak up in class today. Asking her to present to a team of MIT researchers might be too much too soon. Let me talk to her first, he said. This is all very new for her. After hanging up, Dr. Roberts sat back in his chair trying to process the implications. If Dr. Wong and her team validated Maya's work, it could lead to publication in a major physics journal. A high school sophomore, published in a field where most contributors had advanced degrees. It was almost unheard of. His wife poked her head into his office. Everything okay? You've been in here for hours. He looked up, a smile spreading across his face. Remember how I always said I hope to teach the next Einstein someday? I think I might actually have found her. Back at her apartment, Maya was finally forcing herself to focus on her homework when she heard keys in the door. Her mom walked in, still in her nursing scrubs, looking tired but happy. Hi, sweetie, she called, setting down her bag. How was school today? Maya opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she possibly explain what had happened? Her mom would be proud, of course, but would she understand the significance? Physics wasn't her field. It was interesting, she said finally. Her mom raised an eyebrow as she kicked off her shoes. Interesting good or interesting bad? Good, I think. I spoke up in physics class today. That's wonderful, her mom said, coming over to give her a hug. I know how hard that is for you. What was it about? Maya hesitated. Just a different way of thinking about a problem. Dr. Roberts seemed to like it. Of course he did. You're brilliant. Her mom squeezed her shoulder, then headed toward the kitchen. I'm starving. Have you eaten? Not yet, Maya admitted. Let's heat up that leftover pasta. You can tell me more about your day while we eat. Over dinner, Maya gave her mom a simplified version of what had happened, downplaying Dr. Roberts' excitement and the possibility of her work being shared with MIT researchers. Her mom listened attentively, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested, even if she didn't fully grasp the scientific concepts. I always knew you were special, she said when Maya finished her story. Even when you were little, the way you looked at the world was different. Remember how you used to take apart all your toys to see how they worked? Maya smiled at the memory. You never got mad even when I couldn't put them back together, because I could see how your mind worked. Always curious, always searching for answers. Her mom reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm so proud of you, Maya, not just for being smart, but for finding the courage to share your ideas. That night, Maya lay awake long after her mom had gone to bed. Her mind was racing, replaying the events of the day and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would the other students treat her differently now? Would Dr. Roberts expect her to keep coming up with brilliant insights? What if the MIT researchers looked at her work and found it riddled with errors? Her phone buzzed on her nightstand. Another text from Zoe. Just heard from my cousin who's at MIT. Apparently there's some buzz in the physics department there about a high school student who solved a major quantum problem. That's you! Call me tomorrow before school. Maya stared at the message in disbelief. How had word traveled so fast? And was it really possible that people at MIT were talking about her work already? Sleep seemed impossible now. She got out of bed and went to her desk, turning on the small lamp. From her backpack, she pulled out her physics notebook and began to review her work on quantum entanglement. If she was going to be discussing this with actual research scientists, she needed to be absolutely sure of her mathematics. As she worked through the equations again, checking each step meticulously, she felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Part of her wished she could go back to being invisible, to sitting quietly in the back row where no one noticed her. But another part, a part that had been suppressed for too long, was thrilled that her ideas were being taken seriously. The sun was beginning to rise when Maya finally returned to bed. Having convinced herself that her approach was mathematically sound, even if it turned out not to be as revolutionary as Dr. Roberts seemed to think. The next morning at school, Maya sensed the difference as soon as she walked through the front doors. Students she had never spoken to looked at her with curious expressions. A few nodded or smiled as she passed. Word had spread beyond the advanced physics class. Li Wei caught up to her at her locker. Is it true? He asked without preamble. Did you really solve some famous physics problem that even Einstein couldn't figure out? Maya winced. No, that's not. I just had a different way of looking at something. It probably isn't even right. That's not what I heard, Li Wei said, falling into step beside her as she headed to her first class. I heard Dr. Roberts was calling MIT about your work. News really did travel fast in a small high school. It's being way overblown, Maya insisted. Can we talk about something else? Li Wei seemed to sense her discomfort and nodded. Sure, are you coming to science club today? Zoe's been texting everyone about it. I'm thinking about it, Maya said noncommittally. As they reached her classroom, Li Wei gave her a sympathetic look. For what it's worth, I think it's cool what you did. Standing up in front of everyone like that, I could never do it. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of whispers and stares. In English class, the teacher actually asked her if she would share her thoughts on The Great Gatsby, something that had never happened before. Maya gave a brief, hesitant answer, then retreated back into her shell. By lunchtime, the attention was becoming unbearable. Maya grabbed her food and was looking for an empty table when she spotted Zoe waving her over to a crowded table near the center of the cafeteria. Sit with us, Zoe called, making room on the bench beside her. Maya hesitated, then slowly made her way over. The table fell silent as she approached. Everyone, this is Maya, Zoe announced unnecessarily. Maya, this is everyone. There were mumbled hellos and curious stares. Maya sat down, keeping her eyes on her lunch tray. Is it true Roberts is setting you up with MIT? Someone asked bluntly. Maya's head snapped up. No, he thought my idea was interesting, that's all. He wanted to share it with a colleague. A colleague who happens to run the quantum research lab at MIT, Zoe added, not helping. How did you even come up with that approach? Asked another student, a junior whose name Maya couldn't remember. Did you read about it somewhere? Maya shook her head. I was just playing around with the equations. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I work on physics problems. For fun? Someone else asked incredulously. Maya felt her cheeks growing hot. It helps me relax, she said quietly. There was an awkward silence, then Zoe jumped in with a change of subject, asking about the upcoming school dance. The conversation shifted and Maya ate her lunch in silence, grateful for the reprieve from being the center of attention. After lunch, she headed to the library for her free period, hoping to find a quiet corner where she could work on her homework and avoid the whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere now. As she settled at a table in the back, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Dr. Roberts. Maya, could you come to my classroom during your free period? There's something important I'd like to discuss with you. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. What if he'd discovered a fundamental flaw in her approach? What if he'd shown it to his colleague at MIT, and they'd laughed at how naive and misguided it was? Taking a deep breath, she gathered her things and headed toward Dr. Roberts' classroom. When she arrived, he was sitting at his desk, typing on his laptop. He looked up when she entered and broke into a wide smile. Maya, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. She perched on the edge of a front row desk, her backpack still on her shoulder in case she needed to make a quick escape. I spoke with my colleague at MIT last night, Dr. Roberts began, his eyes bright with excitement. Dr. Wong is one of the leading researchers in quantum physics, and she was extremely impressed with your work. Maya blinked. She was? Very much so. In fact, she'd like to discuss it with you directly. She's setting up a Zoom call with her research team for this evening. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. A Zoom call with real researchers? Dr. Roberts seemed to notice her panic. I understand this is all happening very quickly, he said, his tone gentler. And if you're not comfortable with it, that's completely fine. I can tell Dr. Wong you need more time. Maya bit her lip, torn between fear and an undeniable sense of excitement. Real quantum physicists wanted to hear her ideas. How could she pass up that opportunity? What would I need to do? She asked finally. Just explain your approach the same way you did in class yesterday. They'll probably have questions about your mathematical derivation and the implications of your model. Maya took a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it, Dr. Roberts beamed. Excellent. The call is scheduled for 7 p.m. I can set it up in this classroom, or if you prefer, we could arrange for you to join from home. Here would be better, Maya said quickly. The thought of her mom hovering in the background while she talked to MIT scientists was too much. Perfect. And Maya, Dr. Roberts added, his expression turning serious, no matter what happens with this call or where your idea leads, I want you to know that what you did yesterday, The courage it took to speak up and share your unique perspective, that was already remarkable. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she left the classroom and headed to her next class, she felt as if she were walking through a dream. 24 hours ago, she had been nobody, just another face in the hallway. And now she was preparing to discuss quantum physics with researchers from one of the top universities in the world. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Maya couldn't focus on any of her classes, her mind constantly circling back to the upcoming Zoom call. What if they asked questions she couldn't answer? What if they found a fatal flaw in her reasoning? What if they thought she was just a presumptuous high school student who had no business playing with advanced theoretical physics? By the time the final bell rang, her anxiety had reached a fever pitch. She texted her mom to let her know she would be staying late at school for a meeting, careful not to mention MIT or quantum physics researchers. Instead of going to science club as she had half promised Zoe, Maya went back to the library, finding a quiet corner where she could review her notes once more. She wrote out the key equation again and again, making sure she understood every step of her own derivation. At 6:45, she made her way back to Dr. Roberts' classroom. He was already there, setting up his laptop on the desk and arranging chairs in front of it. "Ah, Maya, perfect timing," he said, looking up as she entered. "We'll be ready to start in a few minutes. Dr. Wong and her team are just finishing up another meeting." Maya nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. She sat in one of the chairs, clutching her folder of notes so tightly that her knuckles turned white. At precisely 7:00, Dr. Roberts clicked a link and the laptop screen filled with faces. 6 people in what looked like a conference room, all focused intently on the camera. "Greg, good to see you," said a woman in the center who Maya assumed must be Dr. Wong. She appeared to be in her 50s with short gray hair and bright, intelligent eyes. And this must be Maya Chen. Maya managed a small nod. "I'm Dr. Vivian Wong," the woman continued, her voice warm and encouraging. "And these are members of my research team at MIT. We've all been very excited to meet you after seeing your approach to quantum entanglement." One by one, the researchers introduced themselves. 2 professors, 3 postdoctoral fellows, and a graduate student. Maya tried to remember their names, but her anxiety made it difficult to focus. "So, Maya," Dr. Wong said when the introductions were complete, "Dr. Roberts has shared your notes with us. But we'd love to hear directly from you about how you developed this approach. Could you walk us through your thinking process?" Maya glanced at Dr. Roberts, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, she opened her folder and began to explain. Alex Kim, a second-year graduate student at MIT, hadn't expected anything extraordinary from the research team meeting that evening. He'd joined Dr. Wong's quantum physics lab 6 months ago, and was still trying to find his footing among the brilliant minds that surrounded him. Usually, these meetings involved discussing recent papers, troubleshooting experiments, or reviewing grant proposals. Important work, but rarely exciting. So when Dr. Wong announced they would be video conferencing with a high school student who had developed a novel approach to quantum entanglement, Alex was skeptical. Probably some science fair project that a professor friend was overhyping, he thought. But as the Zoom call progressed and the soft-spoken teenager named Maya began explaining her theory, Alex's skepticism gave way to astonishment. The girl was speaking about quantum mechanics with a clarity and intuition that even some of his fellow grad students lacked. And the equation she had derived, so elegantly simple, seemed to reframe the entanglement problem in a way he had never considered. When the call ended after nearly 2 hours of discussion, Alex sat back in his chair, mind racing. The room was buzzing with excitement as the senior researchers debated the implications of Maya's approach. "This could lead to a breakthrough in quantum computing if it holds up," Dr. Patel, one of the postdocs, was saying. "The mathematical consistency is remarkable," added Dr. Wong. "We need to run some simulations to test the predictions, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Alex barely heard them. He was still thinking about that equation, so simple yet so profound, and the fact that it had come from a 15-year-old who, by her own admission, had taught herself quantum physics from library books. That night, unable to sleep, Alex logged onto X, formerly Twitter, and typed out a message. "Just witnessed something incredible. A high school sophomore may have solved a quantum physics problem that stumped researchers for decades. Her approach to entanglement is mathematically elegant and potentially revolutionary. Remember the name Maya Chen. Quantum breakthrough. He hesitated before hitting post. He hadn't asked permission to share Maya's name or work. But Dr. Wong had already mentioned plans to fast-track a paper with Maya as co-author, so it would be public knowledge soon enough. And he didn't include any specific details about her equation or approach. Still, he edited the tweet to remove Maya's last name before posting it. Just witnessed something incredible. A high school sophomore may have solved a quantum physics problem that stumped researchers for decades. Her approach to entanglement is mathematically elegant and potentially revolutionary. Quantum breakthrough. Satisfied with the change, he clicked post and went to bed, expecting the tweet might get a few likes from his small circle of physics friends. He was wrong. By morning, his post had been shared over 10,000 times. Overnight, it had caught the attention of several popular science communicators with large followings, who had amplified it with comments like, "This is why we need diverse perspectives in physics," and proof that groundbreaking ideas can come from anywhere. One prominent physicist with over 1 million followers had shared it with the comment, "If true, this could be one of the most significant contributions to quantum theory in recent years." Looking forward to seeing this published and peer-reviewed, Alex stared at his phone in disbelief as notifications continued to pour in. What had he done? Meanwhile, Maya was getting ready for school, completely unaware of her growing internet fame. The Zoom call with the MIT researchers had gone better than she could have imagined. After her initial nervousness, she had found herself engaged in a stimulating discussion about the implications of her approach. The researchers had asked challenging questions, but not in a dismissive way. They seemed genuinely interested in exploring her ideas further. Dr. Wong had even mentioned the possibility of Maya co-authoring a paper for submission to a prestigious physics journal, with support from the MIT team to develop and refine the mathematical framework. As Maya walked to school, she felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Part of her still couldn't believe this was happening. Another part worried about the attention it might bring. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "OMG, have you seen what's happening online?" Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" She texted back. "You're trending. Someone from MIT tweeted about you." Before Maya could reply, another text came through with a screenshot of Alex's viral post. Though it didn't mention her last name, the description was specific enough that anyone from her school who saw it would know it referred to her. Maya's stomach dropped. The post had over 50,000 shares now, and the comments section was filled with thousands of replies, some expressing amazement, others skepticism, and many asking for more details about the breakthrough. By the time Maya reached school, her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Somehow, people had found her social media accounts despite her last name not being in the original post. Her Instagram following, previously a modest 86 people, mostly family and classmates, had exploded to over 5,000 and was growing by the minute. As she walked through the school entrance, the usual morning chatter died down, and heads turned in her direction. Maya kept her eyes on the floor, cheeks burning as she hurried to her locker. Zoe was waiting for her there, practically bouncing with excitement. "You're famous," she exclaimed. "Like internet famous. People all over the world are talking about you." "I don't want to be famous," Maya muttered, fumbling with her locker combination. Zoe's enthusiasm dimmed slightly as she noticed Maya's distress. "Hey, it's okay. This is good fame, not bad fame. People are impressed by your brain." "But I didn't ask for any of this," Maya said, finally getting her locker open. "The MIT meeting was just supposed to be a discussion about my idea, not this." She gestured vaguely at her phone, which was still buzzing with notifications.